No one believed the Kracken could be tamed, until a human zoologist stepped foot on Beta Z. The monstrous beast, standing 30 feet tall with 6 legs, razor-sharp claws, and venomous fangs, had terrorized the peaceful betazoid population for years. Cities lay in ruins, thousands dead, and the planet's telepathic inhabitants found themselves powerless against the creature's unrelenting fury. The Betazoid High Council, their options exhausted and time running short, turned to the newly established human embassy on their world. They requested aid in dealing with the Kracken, a decision that didn't come easily to the proud telepathic race. Their reluctance was palpable as Matthew Henry, a 35-year-old human zoologist specializing in dangerous Earth predators, arrived on Beta Z. Matthew met with the High Council, his presence drawing skeptical glances and hushed whispers. The Council introduced him to Spica, a male betazoid scientist assigned to assist in the seemingly impossible task. The terms were clear. Matthew had 30 days to tame or eliminate the Kracken. Failure meant the deployment of a planetary defense weapon that would destroy the beast but wreak havoc on Beta Z's environment. Undeterred by the Council's doubt, Matthew dove into his work. He pored over betazoid historical records and visited recent attack sites. The zoologist's trained eye noticed patterns in the Kracken's behavior, cycles of intense aggression followed by long periods of dormancy. This observation led Matthew to hypothesize a neurological imbalance in the creature, possibly triggered by the unique radiation from Beta Z's binary star system. Matthew proposed a daring plan to capture the Kracken using a combination of advanced Earth technology and betazoid telepathic abilities. Spica's skepticism was evident, believing the plan too risky and doomed to fail. The High Council reluctantly approved, their reservations clear in their voices as they questioned how a human could succeed where their most powerful telepaths had failed. Undaunted, Matthew began preparations. He worked alongside human engineers to construct a specialized containment facility and developed a potent tranquilizer that combined Earth and betazoid compounds. As the deadline loomed, tensions rose between Matthew and the betazoid population. Many viewed his presence as a waste of precious time, their hopes dwindling with each passing day. The situation reached a critical point when word arrived that the Kracken had emerged from its dormant state. The beast was heading towards a major betazoid population center, forcing Matthew to accelerate his plans. With time running out and lives at stake, the human zoologist prepared to confront the monstrous Kracken, determined to prove that humanity's ingenuity could solve a problem that had baffled an entire telepathic civilization. As Matthew gathered his equipment and steeled himself for the confrontation, he couldn't help but wonder, could he, a single human, truly tame the untamable and save an alien world from destruction? As Matthew gathered his equipment and steeled himself for the confrontation with the Kracken, a sudden commotion erupted outside the Betazoid research facility. A sleek interstellar shuttle touched down, its engines humming with awe-inspiring power. The hatch opened, revealing a young woman in a crisp Earth Science Division uniform. Dr. Emily Chen, Xenobiology Department, she announced, striding purposefully towards Matthew and Spica. I've been sent by the Interstellar Research Division to assist with the Kracken situation. Matthew's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Dr. Chen, I've read your papers on alien neurobiology. Your work is groundbreaking. Emily nodded briskly, her dark eyes scanning the equipment Matthew had assembled. And I've reviewed your initial reports, Dr. Henry. We need to talk immediately. There's a critical flaw in your plan. Spica stepped forward, his telepathic senses picking up on the urgency in Emily's thoughts. What flaw? We're about to deploy. Emily pulled out a handheld holographic projector, displaying a complex molecular structure. The tranquilizer you've developed. Based on my analysis of the Kracken's biology from the data you've collected, there's a high probability it could be lethal. Matthew's face paled. Lethal? But we've tested it on similar compounds. Similar isn't enough, Emily cut in. The Kracken's neurochemistry is unique. We need a non-invasive approach. She manipulated the hologram, bringing up schematics for a device. I propose using a neuromodulation device. It could potentially calm the Kracken without causing harm. Spica's eyes narrowed. A device? We don't have time to develop new technology. The Kracken is active and heading towards a major population center. I can modify existing Earth tech, Emily insisted. It's our best shot at a humane solution. Matthew studied the schematics, his mind racing. It could work, but the Betazoid High Council... We need to present this to them immediately, Emily said. The trio rushed to the council chambers, where Emily laid out her proposal. The Betazoid leaders exchanged skeptical glances, their doubt palpable in the air. This is too risky, one council member declared. We cannot gamble the lives of our people on untested human technology. Matthew stepped forward. With all due respect, council members, Dr. Chen's expertise is unparalleled. I believe her approach has merit. Spica shook his head. Matthew, we should stick to the original plan. We don't have time for experiments. The tension in the room escalated as arguments broke out among the council members. Emily stood her ground, her conviction unwavering. I understand your reservations, but this device could save not only your people, but also preserve a unique life form. Isn't that worth the attempt? After heated debate, the council reluctantly agreed to give Emily a chance, but with a strict deadline. You have 24 hours to prove this device can work. If it fails, we deploy the planetary defense weapon. With the clock ticking, Emily set up a makeshift lab in the research facility. She worked feverishly, modifying Earth technology to interface with Betazoid power sources. Matthew assisted, providing insights on the Kraken's behavior patterns, while Spica reluctantly offered information on Betazoid telepathic techniques. Hours slipped by as Emily encountered one setback after another. The device's range was limited, and initial tests on smaller Betazoid creatures yielded inconsistent results. Frustration mounted as the deadline loomed ever closer. It's not working, Spica said, watching another test fail. We need to prepare the original plan as a backup. Emily rubbed her tired eyes, refusing to give up. There's something we're missing. The neural patterns are almost aligned, but not quite. Matthew paced the lab, his mind racing. Suddenly he stopped. What if we're thinking too small? The Kraken's brain is massive compared to these test subjects. Maybe the device needs more power, a wider frequency range. Emily's eyes lit up. That's it. We need to calibrate it for a larger neural network. She immediately began reconfiguring the device. As Emily worked, reports came in of the Kraken approaching the outskirts of Rix, the nearest major city. The Betazoid High Council demanded updates, their patience wearing thin. Finally, Emily held up the modified neural modulation device. It's ready for a final test, but we need a larger subject. Matthew looked at the device, then at Emily and Spica. He took a deep breath. Test it on me. Emily's eyes widened. Matthew, no. We don't know the potential risk to a human brain. We don't have time to find a larger alien subject, Matthew argued. If it can safely modulate my neural patterns, it should work on the Kraken. It's our only chance to prove this can work. Despite Emily's objections, Matthew insisted. They set up the test, tension thick in the air as Emily activated the device. Matthew's body relaxed, his brainwaves displayed on a monitor, shifting to a calm, steady pattern. After a few minutes, Emily deactivated the device. Matthew blinked, then smiled. I feel fine. Calm, actually. It works. The successful test on Matthew convinced the Betazoid High Council to approve the plan. They quickly prepared a small, agile spacecraft to confront the Kraken. Matthew took the pilot's seat, with Emily securing the neural modulation device. Spica joined them, his telepathic abilities their best chance at locating the Kraken precisely. As they prepared for takeoff, Emily made last-minute adjustments to the device. Remember, she said, we need to get within 100 meters for optimal effectiveness. Any further, and we risk the signal being too weak. Matthew nodded, his hands steady on the controls. Let's go save Betazed. The spacecraft lifted off, streaking towards the last known location of the Kraken. As they approached the outskirts of Rix, Spica closed his eyes, extending his telepathic senses. I feel it, he said, his voice strained. So much rage, so much confusion. It's close. Matthew piloted the craft low over the treetops, following Spica's directions. Suddenly, a massive form burst through the canopy ahead of them, 6 legs pounding the earth, fangs gleaming in the light of the binary stars. The Kracken had arrived, and with it, the moment that would decide the fate of an entire world. The Kracken burst through the canopy, its massive form casting long shadows across the landscape. Matthew's hands tightened on the controls as he maneuvered the craft closer to the beast. Emily leaned forward, her fingers dancing across the neural modulation device's interface. "We need to get within 100 meters, she reminded them, her voice taut with tension. Suddenly, the device emitted a series of sharp beeps. Emily's eyes widened as she scanned the readouts. "No, no, no," she muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. "What's wrong?" Matthew asked, keeping his eyes locked on the Cracken's movements. Emily's face paled. "The atmospheric conditions are interfering with the device. Its range is drastically reduced. We'll need to get much closer than we anticipated." Spica's telepathic senses reeled from the Cracken's overwhelming presence. "Its mind is chaos," he reported, his voice strained. "So much pain, so much confusion." Matthew made a split-second decision. He angled the craft downward, aiming for a small clearing directly in the Cracken's path. "What are you doing?" Emily exclaimed, gripping her seat as the craft descended rapidly. "Getting us close enough," Matthew replied, his teeth clenched. The landing was rough, the ground trembling beneath them as the Cracken's footsteps drew nearer. Matthew unbuckled his harness and reached for the hatch. "Matthew, wait!" Emily called out, but he was already moving. Stepping onto the shaking earth, Matthew pulled out his standard-issue stun gun. It felt woefully inadequate against the approaching behemoth, but it was all he had. "I'll draw its attention," he shouted back to Emily. "You focus on fixing that device." Spica emerged from the craft, his face a mask of concern. "I'll assist you," he said, closing his eyes to focus his telepathic abilities. The Cracken's massive form filled their vision, its 6 legs causing miniature earthquakes with each step. Matthew raised his stun gun, knowing it would do little more than annoy the creature, but hoping it would be enough to keep its focus on him. As the beast drew closer, Matthew's trained eye caught something unusual in its movements. There was a jerky, uncoordinated quality to its gait, almost as if it were in pain. He'd seen similar behavior in large Earth predators suffering from neurological disorders. "Emily," he called back, "I think there's something wrong with its nervous system. It's not just aggressive, it's suffering." Inside the craft, Emily worked feverishly, her mind racing through possible solutions. She glanced at the Betazoid technology Spica had brought aboard, an idea forming. "That's it," she whispered, reaching for the alien components. Outside, Matthew fired his stun gun. The energy blast struck the Cracken's tough hide, eliciting an ear-splitting roar. The creature's attention zeroed in on Matthew, its massive head lowering as it prepared to charge. Spica's voice cut through the chaos. "Its mind. It's so chaotic. I can barely make sense of it." Emily burst from the craft, the modified device in her hands. "I've got it," she shouted. "But there's a catch. We need a direct neural link to amplify the signal." Matthew turned to her, the Cracken's hot breath washing over him. "Do it. Link me up." "Matthew, no," Emily protested. "The risk to your mind—" "We don't have time to argue," Matthew interrupted, backing away from the advancing Kracken. "Do it now." Spica stepped forward. "I'll assist with the link. My telepathic abilities should help stabilize the connection." Emily hesitated for a split second before nodding. She quickly attached neural sensors to Matthew's temples, linking him to the device. The moment the connection was established, Matthew's world exploded into chaos. A tidal wave of sensations and emotions crashed over him. Pain, confusion, and a deep primal fear overwhelmed his senses. He staggered, nearly falling as his mind struggled to process the input. Spica grabbed Matthew's arm, his own mind reaching out to help navigate the tumultuous mental landscape. "Focus, Matthew," he urged. "Find the pattern in the chaos." Through the haze of jumbled thoughts and feelings, Matthew began to discern something. The Cracken's suffering was palpable, its mind trapped in a cycle of pain and confusion, caused by the very environment it inhabited. "Emily," Matthew gasped, his voice strained. "Activate the device, now!" Emily flipped the switch, and a wave of energy pulsed outward. The Kracken reared back, letting out a roar that shook the very air around them. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the device had failed. Then slowly, the massive creature's movements began to calm. Its roars softened to low rumbles, and its aggressive stance relaxed. The Kraken's eyes, once filled with rage and pain, now focused on Matthew with an almost gentle curiosity. As the immediate danger passed, a crowd began to gather at a safe distance. Members of the Betazoid High Council arrived, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Emily worked to stabilize the neural modulation, while Spica continued to support Matthew's mental state. Matthew, still linked to the Kraken, felt a profound connection to the creature. Its pain had subsided, replaced by a tentative calm. He took a cautious step forward, his hand outstretched. The Kraken lowered its massive head, its hot breath washing over Matthew. In that moment, a spark of understanding passed between them. Matthew sensed the creature's loneliness, its confusion in a world it didn't understand. "We did it," Emily breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "We actually tamed the Kraken." But Matthew knew their work was just getting started. The neural link was a temporary solution, and the underlying problem of the Kraken's neurological imbalance remained unsolved. As he stood there, connected to this magnificent and misunderstood creature, Matthew realized that their mission had only just begun. The real challenge lay ahead, finding a way to help the Kraken adapt to life on Beta-Z without relying on artificial neural modulation. And in doing so, they might just forge a new understanding between humans, Betazoids, and the incredible life forms that inhabited the galaxy. Galaxy. As Matthew stood there, connected to the Kraken, he felt a surge of responsibility wash over him. The creature's mind, once a chaotic storm, now pulsed with a gentle rhythm against his consciousness. Emily approached cautiously, her eyes darting between Matthew and the massive beast. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew took a deep breath, his gaze still locked with the Kraken's. "It's incredible," he said. "I can sense its thoughts, its emotions. It's not just a mindless monster. It's confused, lonely, and in pain." Spica stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "We need to report this to the High Council immediately. They'll want a full briefing on the situation." As if on cue, a group of Betazoid officials approached, their faces a mix of awe and trepidation. The lead counselor, a tall woman with silver hair, addressed the team. "We've witnessed something extraordinary today, but we need to understand what's happened and what it means for Beta-Z's future." Emily nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Of course, Counselor. We'll prepare a full report right away." As they gathered for the briefing, Matthew struggled to put his experiences into words. He described vivid flashes of the Kraken's memories, deep, dark caverns where it slumbered for years, and the disorienting awakening to a world that seemed to assault its senses. "It's like it's not meant to be awake for this long," Matthew explained, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There are cycles of sleep and activity, but something's disrupted them." Emily's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "The hibernation patterns. Matthew, you're describing long-term hibernation cycles. What if the Kraken's neurological imbalance is linked to disrupted sleep patterns?" As the team discussed this new theory, the briefing room door slid open, revealing a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face. He strode in purposefully, earning curious glances from the assembled group. "Dr. Marcus Reeves," he introduced himself, nodding to the council members. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have information critical to this situation." The lead counselor raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "A xenoecologist," Dr. Reeves replied. "I've been studying Beta-Z's ecosystem for years. When I heard about the Kraken situation, I knew I had to come." Emily stepped forward, intrigued. "What kind of information?" Dr. Reeves pulled out a datapad, projecting a series of charts and graphs. "I've been tracking changes in Beta-Z's environmental conditions. There's been a significant increase in solar radiation from your binary star system over the past decade." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Emily's mind raced, connecting the dots. The increased radiation, It could be interfering with the Kraken's natural hibernation cycles, causing neurological distress. Matthew nodded, the pieces falling into place. That's why it's been so aggressive. It's sleep-deprived and constantly bombarded by radiation its body isn't equipped to handle. Emily began pacing, her thoughts coalescing into a plan. We need to create a sanctuary for the Kraken, a shielded environment that mimics its natural hibernation conditions. It would protect it from the radiation and allow its neurological systems to reset. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of hope and skepticism. That's a massive undertaking, one of them pointed out. It would require significant resources and time. Time we don't have, Spica added. The neural modulation is only a temporary solution. Matthew stood up, his decision made. I'll maintain the neural link with the Kraken, he said, his voice steady, for as long as it takes to build the sanctuary and study the creature safely. Emily whirled to face him, her eyes wide with shock. Matthew, no, we have no idea what the long-term effects of such prolonged neural contact could be. It's the only way, Matthew insisted, meeting her gaze. We can't risk the Kraken becoming aggressive again, and we can't keep it sedated indefinitely. This way, we can protect Beta Z and help the creature. The room erupted into discussion, with council members debating the merits and risks of Matthew's proposal. As the arguments flew back and forth, Emily found herself watching Matthew, struck by his unwavering willpower. Finally, the lead counselor raised her hand for silence. Mr. Reeves, your offer is both brave and concerning. Are you certain you understand the risks? Matthew nodded solemnly. I do, but I also understand the potential benefits. This isn't just about saving Beta Z from the Kraken. It's about forging a new understanding between our species and the life forms we encounter in the galaxy. The counselor studied him for a long moment before nodding. Very well. We'll proceed with your proposal, but under strict medical supervision. As the meeting adjourned, Emily pulled Matthew aside. I hope you know what you're doing, she said softly, concern evident in her voice. Matthew offered a small smile. I'm not sure anyone knows what they're doing when it comes to first contact situations, but I know this feels right. Over the next few hours, a flurry of activity transformed the area around the pacified Kraken into a makeshift research base. Emily set up a medical monitoring station, her fingers flying over the controls as she calibrated the equipment to track Matthew's vital signs and neural activity. Spica approached her, his face etched with concern. I've arranged a rotation schedule for telepathic support, he said. We'll take shifts to ensure Matthew has constant mental reinforcement. Emily nodded gratefully, her eyes never leaving the monitors. Thank you, Spica. We'll need all the help we can get. As night fell, Matthew sat cross-legged near the Kraken, his eyes closed in concentration. The massive creature lay nearby, its breathing slow and steady. Emily watched from her station, her heart clenching with a mix of admiration and fear for her colleague. Suddenly, Matthew's eyes flew open, a look of wonder crossing his face. Emily, he called out softly, I think I'm seeing its dreams. Emily rushed to his side, scanner in hand. What do you mean? What are you experiencing? Matthew's eyes were unfocused, as if seeing something far away. I see vast caverns, glowing with bioluminescent life. The Kraken is there, but smaller, younger. It's learning, growing. There's a whole society down there, Emily, an entire ecosystem we never knew existed. As Matthew described the vivid images flowing through his mind, Emily felt a surge of excitement tinged with worry. They were on the brink of an incredible discovery, but at what cost to Matthew's psyche? In the distance, Dr. Reeves set up atmospheric monitoring equipment, his face illuminated by the glow of his instruments. The sanctuary was still just a concept, a dream of safety for a creature out of place in a changing world. But as Emily watched Matthew's face, alight with the wonders he was experiencing, she knew they had taken the first step on an extraordinary journey. The night deepened, and with it, the connection between man and beast grew stronger. As Emily kept her vigilant watch, she couldn't help but wonder what other marvels and challenges awaited them in the days to come. Come! As dawn broke over the Betazoid landscape, casting long shadows across the makeshift research base. Emily rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at her monitors. It had been several days since Matthew first connected with the Kracken, and the strain was beginning to show on everyone involved. She watched as Matthew sat motionless near the creature, his face a mask of intense concentration. Over the past few days, she had noticed subtle changes in his behavior, a quickness in his responses, a sharpness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. At first, she had attributed it to lack of sleep, but now she wasn't so sure. "Matthew," she called softly, approaching him with a scanner in hand. "How are you feeling?" His eyes snapped open, and Emily gasped. There was an otherworldly quality to them, a depth that seemed to go beyond human comprehension. "I'm fine, Emily," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar timbre. "Better than fine, actually. I can sense things I never could before. It's like my mind has expanded." Emily frowned, her concern deepening. "I need to run some more tests. These readings are unlike anything I've seen before." As she worked, Dr. Marcus Reeves burst into the research area, his face flushed with excitement. "I've got it!" he exclaimed, waving a data pad. "I know why the Kracken's been acting erratically." Emily and Matthew turned their attention to the xenoecologist as he explained his findings. The increased solar radiation had been causing a rare mineral in Betazed's crust to emit low-frequency waves, directly interfering with the Kracken's natural biorhythms. "This explains everything," Emily breathed, her mind racing with the implications. The creature's aggressive behavior, its inability to regulate its neural patterns? Matthew nodded, his eyes distant. "I can feel it," he murmured. "The discord in its mind, the struggle against these unnatural rhythms." Before they could discuss further, a commotion at the edge of the camp caught their attention. A shuttle had landed, and from it emerged a man with a purposeful stride and a stern expression. He wore the uniform of Earth's Interstellar Defense Force, his insignia marking him as a high-ranking officer. "Commander Jake Steele," he introduced himself, his voice gruff and authoritative. "I've been sent to assess the situation and ensure the safety of all personnel involved." Emily stepped forward, extending her hand. "Dr. Emily Chen, we appreciate your concern, Commander, but I assure you we have the situation under control." Steele's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the massive Kracken, the complex array of scientific equipment, and Matthew's still form beside the creature. "That remains to be seen, Doctor. From what I understand, you're maintaining control of this beast through a highly experimental and potentially dangerous neural link. That doesn't sound like a stable solution to me." As tensions rose between the newcomer and the research team, Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. "Actually, Commander, we may have a more permanent solution in the works. Based on my recent findings, I believe we can construct a device to neutralize the harmful low-frequency waves affecting the Kracken." Steele raised an eyebrow. "And how long would that take?" "With the right resources, we could have a prototype ready for testing within a week," Reeves replied. The commander nodded curtly. "Very well. You have 1 week to demonstrate progress, but I warn you, if I see any sign that this creature poses a threat to Betazoid or human lives, I will not hesitate to take more decisive action." As Steele strode away to set up his own operations center, Emily turned to Matthew, her face etched with worry. "We need to move quickly. Matthew, I know you've grown attached to the Kracken, but we need to consider the possibility of severing the neural link once the device is ready." Matthew's expression clouded. I'm not sure I can do that, Emily. The connection we share, it's become so much more than I ever imagined. I've seen its past, its interactions with ancient Betazoids. This creature isn't just some mindless beast. It's a living piece of Betazoid history." Emily placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I understand, but we have to think about your well-being, too. The changes we're seeing in your neural patterns, they're unprecedented. We don't know what prolonged exposure might do to you." As the days passed, work on Dr. Reeves's device progressed rapidly, spurred on by the looming deadline set by Commander Steele. Emily divided her time between assisting with the construction and monitoring Matthew's condition, which continued to evolve in ways that both fascinated and alarmed her. Matthew's cognitive abilities had sharpened dramatically. He could process complex equations in seconds, recall minute details from conversations held weeks ago, and even sense the emotions of those around him with startling accuracy. But with these enhanced abilities came moments of disorientation, where he seemed to lose himself in the Kraken's memories. On the eve of the device's first test, Emily found Matthew standing at the edge of the camp, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The Kraken lay nearby, its massive form silhouetted against the setting sun. "Tomorrow's the big day," Emily said softly, coming to stand beside him. "Are you ready?" Matthew turned to her, his eyes shimmering with an inner light that was becoming all too familiar. "Emily, I've seen such wonders through the Kraken's eyes. Vast underground cities, bioluminescent forests that pulse with life, ancient betazoids communing with these creatures in harmony. How can I give that up?" Emily's heart ached at the conflict in his voice. "Matthew, I know it's hard, but remember why we're here. If this works, it could mean freedom for both you and the Kraken. And think of what we could learn if we could communicate with it without putting you at risk." As night fell, the research base hummed with nervous energy. Dr. Reeves ran final diagnostics on his device, while Commander Steele prowled the perimeter, his hand never far from his weapon. The Betazoid High Council members who had gathered for the test spoke in hushed tones, their minds reaching out to sense the mood of those around them. In the quiet hours before dawn, Emily made her final preparations. She knew that the coming test would be a pivotal moment, not just for their mission, but for Matthew's very identity. As she calibrated her equipment one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would change all of their lives forever. The first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, illuminating the tense faces of the gathered crowd. At the center of it all stood Matthew, his hand resting lightly on the Kraken's scaled hide, their connection a nearly visible thing in the morning air. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it the weight of countless hopes, fears, and unknowns pressed down upon them all. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the makeshift research base, a palpable tension filled the air. The moment they had all been working towards had finally arrived, and with it came a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Matthew stood beside the Kraken, his hand resting lightly on its scaled hide. The connection between them seemed almost tangible, a bridge of understanding forged through days of shared consciousness. Emily approached him, her face a mask of concern and grit. "Matthew," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, "it's time. We need to test Dr. Reeves's device, and for that to work, you'll have to temporarily sever the neural link." Matthew's eyes, still shimmering with that otherworldly light, met hers. I'm not sure I can, Emily. The connection we share, it's become a part of me." Emily squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "I know it's difficult, but remember why we're doing this. If it works, it could mean freedom for both you and the Kraken. We need to give this a chance." After a long moment, Matthew nodded, his teeth clenched with persistence. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and began the process of disengaging from the link. The effort was visible on his face, beads of sweat forming on his brow as he fought against the pull of the connection. As the link dissolved, the effect on the Kraken was immediate and alarming. The creature's massive form began to tremble, low rumbling growls emanating from deep within its chest. Its eyes, once calm, now darted about wildly, as if searching for something lost. Dr. Reeves, monitoring the situation from his station, called out, "Activating the device now." With a flick of a switch, the neutralizing waves began to pulse outward, invisible but potent. The Kraken's reaction intensified. Its growls grew louder, more frantic, and its tail lashed out, narrowly missing a cluster of delicate equipment. The gathered Betazoid observers backed away, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and concern. Commander Steele, who had been watching the proceedings with growing unease, barked out an order to his team. "Prepare defensive measures. We can't risk that thing going on a rampage." Emily whirled to face him, her eyes flashing. "No, we need to give the device time to work. Interfering now could ruin everything we've worked for." As the tension between the military and scientific factions threatened to boil over, Matthew, still reeling from the disconnection, made a decision. Despite the obvious danger, he stepped towards the agitated Kracken. "Matthew, what are you doing?" Emily called out, her voice tight with worry. He didn't respond, his focus entirely on the creature before him. Drawing upon the intuition and heightened perception he had gained during their shared consciousness, Matthew began to mimic the Krakken's body language. He lowered his head, then raised it slowly, emitting a low, rumbling sound from deep in his throat. The effect was instantaneous. The Krakken's frantic movements slowed, its attention now fixed solely on Matthew. It tilted its massive head, as if trying to understand this new form of communication. Matthew continued, his movements becoming more fluid and confident. He swayed gently from side to side, his arms outstretched in a gesture that somehow conveyed both strength and peace. The Kracken responded in kind, its own movements becoming less erratic, more purposeful. As this strange dance continued, Dr. Reeves called out excitedly, "It's working! The creature's neural patterns are beginning to stabilize." Emily, her eyes darting between her monitors and the scene before her, added, "Matthew's right. The readings are normalizing. The device is taking effect." Gradually, the Krakken's agitation subsided. Its breathing slowed and the wild look in its eyes faded. The creature lowered itself to the ground, not in distress but in a posture that seemed almost contemplative. As the immediate crisis passed, a new issue became apparent. Several of the Betazoid observers were grimacing, their hands pressed to their temples. Spica, looking pale, approached Emily. "The device," he said, his voice strained. "It's affecting our telepathic abilities. It's uncomfortable." Emily's brow furrowed with concern. "Dr. Reeves, we need to adjust the output. We can't solve one problem by creating another." As the team huddled around the device, working on modifications, Matthew remained with the Kracken. His posture mirrored the creature's, both of them seemingly lost in silent communication. Commander Steele, his earlier aggression tempered by the successful intervention, approached Emily. "I have to admit, Doctor, I'm impressed. But we're not out of the woods yet. What's our next move?" Before Emily could respond, a commotion at the edge of the camp caught their attention. A group of Betazoids, their robes marking them as members of the High Council, were making their way towards them. The lead council member, her eyes bright with excitement, addressed the group. "We've been monitoring the situation. What we've witnessed here today, it's unprecedented. We believe this could be the beginning of a new era of understanding between our people and the Kracken." As the implications of this statement sank in, Emily realized that their mission had just expanded far beyond their original goals. The challenges ahead were numerous: refining the device, understanding Matthew's unique ability to communicate with the Kracken, and navigating the complex political and cultural implications of their discoveries. She glanced at Matthew, still serenely communing with the Kracken, and felt a mix of pride, concern, and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. Whatever lay ahead, she knew their journey was not nearly finished. The dawn breaking over the Betazoid landscape seemed to herald not just a new day, but a new chapter in the relationship between humans, Betazoids, and the mysterious creatures with whom they shared this world. As the implications of their breakthrough settled in, the research team found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of new challenges and opportunities. In the days that followed, the Krakken's behavior took an unexpected turn. The creature, now stabilized by Dr. Reeves's device, began using its massive claws to create intricate patterns on the ground. Emily was the first to notice, her keen scientific eye catching the deliberate nature of the creature's movements. "Matthew, come look at this," she called out, gesturing towards the Krakken's handiwork. Matthew jogged over, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. The patterns weren't random. They resembled ancient Betazoid symbols he had glimpsed in the creature's memories during their neural link. "It's trying to communicate," he breathed, awe evident in his voice. Word spread quickly, and soon a group of Betazoid historians had gathered, their faces alight with excitement as they pored over the symbols. Matthew found himself at the center of it all, his unique ability to interpret the Krakken's intentions, making him an invaluable asset. As the days passed, Matthew spent increasing amounts of time with the Kracken, observing and decoding its patterns. His insights led to a startling revelation. The symbols appeared to be a form of historical record, detailing the creature's role in ancient Betazoid society. "It's incredible," Matthew explained to Emily and Dr. Reeves one evening, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "The Kracken isn't just a part of Betazoid history, it's been actively preserving that history for millennia." While Matthew delved deeper into the Kraken's communications, Emily and Dr. Reeves focused on refining the neutralizing device. The impact on Betazoid telepathic abilities remained a concern, and they worked tirelessly to create a more precise version. Their efforts paid off when they unveiled a modified device with adjustable frequencies. However, during a test run, an unexpected power surge caused the equipment to short out momentarily. The Kracken, suddenly free from the device's influence, began to show signs of agitation. In that critical moment, Matthew's newfound intuition kicked in. Without hesitation, he approached the creature, his body language mirroring the soothing gestures he had learned during their neural link. A series of low, rumbling vocalizations emerged from his throat, echoing the Krakken's own sounds. The gathered team watched in amazement as the Kracken visibly calmed, its massive form relaxing under Matthew's influence. The display of natural communication between human and alien left even the most skeptical observers speechless. As news of this development spread, it caught the attention of Dr. Lyra Tapal, a renowned Betazoid neurobiologist specializing in interspecies communication. Her arrival at the research site brought a new wave of excitement and expertise to the team. Dr. Tapal, a striking woman with the characteristic dark eyes of her people, wasted no time in immersing herself in the project. Her focus quickly centered on Matthew and his unique bond with the Kracken. "Your ability to communicate with the creature is unprecedented," she told Matthew during one of their first meetings. "I believe we can push the boundaries of what's possible in interspecies communication." As Matthew and Dr. Tapal began working closely together, Emily found herself grappling with unexpected emotions. She watched their animated discussions from across the lab, a knot forming in her stomach as she noticed the easy rapport between them. Pushing aside these feelings, Emily threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She and Dr. Reeves spent long hours fine-tuning the neutralizing device, their shared focus on the task at hand providing a welcome distraction. The growing closeness between Matthew and Dr. Tapal didn't go unnoticed by Commander Steele either. His brow furrowed as he observed their interactions, his mind already calculating potential security risks. During a team briefing, Steele voiced his concerns. "Given the Krakken's apparent intelligence and Dr. Moravec's unique connection to it, I propose we implement stricter security protocols and increase military presence at the site." His suggestion was met with immediate resistance from the scientific team. Matthew, usually reserved in such meetings, spoke up forcefully. "With all due respect, Commander, that's the wrong approach," he argued. "We're on the brink of a major breakthrough in interspecies communication. What we need is more openness, not more restrictions." Emily, despite her complicated feelings towards Matthew's closeness with Dr. Tapal, found herself nodding in agreement. "Matthew's right. We need to foster an environment of collaboration, not suspicion." As tensions simmered between the military and scientific factions, the Betazoid High Council made a decisive move. Impressed by the recent discoveries, they declared the area surrounding the Kracken a protected zone and allocated resources for a permanent research facility. The announcement brought a wave of excitement and relief to the team. As plans for the new facility took shape, Dr. Tapal approached Emily with an intriguing proposal. "Dr. Reeves, I've been studying your work on the neutralizing device," she began, her dark eyes gleaming with intellectual curiosity. "I believe that by combining our knowledge of Betazoid telepathy with your bioengineering expertise, we could develop something truly groundbreaking, a neural interface that could allow limited telepathic communication between Betazoids and the Kracken." Emily's scientific mind immediately grasped the potential of such a device. Despite her personal reservations, she couldn't deny the importance of this development. That's incredible, Dr. Tapal. When can we start?" The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as the team worked on the neural interface prototype. The combination of Emily's technical skills and Dr. T'Pal's deep understanding of Betazoid telepathy proved to be a powerful one, and progress came swiftly. As the day of the first test approached, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. The team gathered in the newly constructed lab, the prototype interface gleaming under the harsh lights. Matthew stepped forward, his face set with willpower. "I'll be the test subject," he announced, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. "Matthew, are you sure? Your neural patterns have already undergone significant changes. We don't know how this could affect you." Dr. T'Pal nodded, her expression grave. "Dr. Reeves is right. The risks are considerable." Matthew looked between them, his determination unwavering. "I understand the risks, but I'm the best candidate for this. My connection with the Kracken gives us the best chance of success." As the team began preparations for the crucial experiment, Emily found herself torn between professional excitement and personal worry. She watched Matthew being fitted with the interface, her mind racing with the potential outcomes of this test. The air in the lab crackled with tension as Matthew took his position near the Kracken. Dr. T'Pal stood nearby, ready to monitor the telepathic aspects of the communication. Emily's fingers hovered over the control panel, ready to activate the interface. With a deep breath, Matthew nodded, signaling his readiness. Emily's finger descended towards the activation switch, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. As the interface hummed to life, they stood on the precipice of a new frontier in human-alien relations, the outcome of which could redefine humanity's place in the galactic community. Community as they knew it. Emily's finger hesitated for a fraction of a second before pressing the activation switch. The interface hummed to life, its soft blue glow illuminating Matthew's determined face. For a moment, the lab was silent, save for the gentle whirring of equipment and the Cracken's steady breathing. Suddenly, the creature's massive form shuddered violently. Its skin, normally a muted gray, began to ripple with irregular patterns of sickly green and purple. Matthew winced, his connection with the Kracken allowing him to sense its distress. "Something's wrong," he gasped, his voice strained. "It's in pain." Dr. Reeves rushed to her console, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the incoming data. Her eyes widened as she identified the cause. "It's a solar flare from Beta-Z's binary star system," she announced, her voice tense. "The radiation is intensifying the harmful low-frequency waves. The Cracken's unique biology is reacting negatively to it." Emily immediately began shutting down the neural interface. "We need to stabilize the creature first," she said, her mind already racing through potential solutions. "Matthew, can you try to calm it down?" Matthew nodded, removing the interface equipment and approaching the Kracken. He began a series of low, rumbling vocalizations, his body mimicking the soothing gestures he had learned during their neural link. The creature's trembling subsided slightly, but its skin continued to shift in alarming patterns. As Emily and Dr. Reeves worked frantically to modify their neutralizing device, Commander Steele burst into the lab, his face grim. "We need to evacuate non-essential personnel immediately," he ordered. "If that thing becomes violent, we could have a disaster on our hands." Dr. T'Pal, who had been monitoring the Kracken's telepathic output, shook her head emphatically. "A mass evacuation could further agitate the creature," she argued. "We need to maintain as much calm as possible." The tension in the room escalated as Steele and T'Pal continued to disagree, their voices rising. Matthew found himself caught in the middle, trying to mediate while simultaneously focusing on the distressed Kracken. "Please," he said, his voice strained with effort. "We need to work together. The creature can sense our discord, and it's making things worse." Emily, who had been deep in thought, suddenly looked up. "I have an idea," she announced, her voice cutting through the argument. "We can create a temporary electromagnetic shield around the Kracken using a network of modified satellites. It should block the harmful radiation and stabilize its condition." Dr. Reeves nodded enthusiastically. "That could work, but we'd need to redirect several of Beta-Z's weather control satellites. It could lead to climate disruptions across the planet." A tense silence fell over the room as the implications of Emily's plan sank in. Commander Steele was the first to speak. "I'll contact the Betazoid High Council immediately. They need to make this decision. As they waited for the council's response, Emily noticed Matthew's condition deteriorating. He stood by the Kracken, his body swaying slightly with exhaustion, dark circles forming under his eyes. She approached him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Matthew, you need to rest. You're pushing yourself too hard." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving the creature. "I can't leave it. It needs me." Before Emily could argue further, Commander Steele returned. "The council has approved the plan," he announced. "Dr. Reeves, you'll lead the team of Betazoid engineers in reprogramming and repositioning the satellites." As Dr. Reeves rushed off to begin work on the shield, the Krakken's condition suddenly worsened. Its massive body began thrashing violently, causing tremors that shook the entire facility. Alarms blared as equipment toppled and cracks appeared in the walls. Matthew stumbled, then straightened, a look of unwavering purpose on his face. "I have to re-establish the neural link," he said. "It's the only way to keep it calm long enough for the shield to be activated." Emily's heart leapt into her throat. "Matthew, no, it's too dangerous. We don't know what that level of connection could do to you, especially in the creature's current state." But Matthew was already moving towards the neural interface equipment. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice firm despite the fear evident in his eyes. "I have to try." As Matthew initiated the link, his body went rigid, a cry of pain escaping his lips. Emily watched in horror as he struggled to maintain the connection, his face contorted in agony. She could only imagine the chaotic flood of images and sensations pouring into his mind from the distressed Kracken. Time seemed to stretch as Matthew fought to stabilize the creature. Emily found herself holding her breath, her eyes darting between Matthew's strain-racked form and the monitors displaying the Krakken's vital signs. Gradually, impossibly, the readings began to normalize. Just as Matthew's knees began to buckle, Dr. Reeves's voice crackled over the intercom. "Electromagnetic shield activated." The effect was immediate. The Krakken's thrashing ceased, its skin slowly returning to its natural gray hue. But as the creature calmed, Matthew collapsed to the floor, unresponsive. "Matthew!" Emily cried, rushing to his side. She checked his pulse, finding it weak and erratic. "We need medical assistance immediately." As the medical team rushed in, Emily found herself pushed aside. She watched, feeling helpless, as they worked over Matthew's still form. The room spun around her, the voices of the medical team fading into a dull roar. She barely registered Commander Steele's hand on her shoulder, his voice seeming to come from far away. "Dr. Reeves, we need you to monitor the Krakken's condition. Can you do that?" Emily nodded numbly, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. As she moved to the monitoring station, she cast one last glance at Matthew being rushed out on a stretcher. The sight of his pale, unmoving form sent a jolt of fear through her, coupled with a sudden, stark realization of just how much he had come to mean to her. Turning back to her console, Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. The Kracken was stable for now, but Matthew's fate remained uncertain. As she began her analysis, Emily knew that the true test of their mission and their team was only just beginning. As Emily immersed herself in analyzing the Krakken's data, the hours blurred together. The creature's vital signs had stabilized, but its behavior remained erratic, its skin occasionally rippling with faint patterns of color. A commotion at the lab entrance drew her attention. Dr. Reeves burst in, his face etched with concern. "Emily, you need to come to the medical center immediately." Her heart raced as she followed him through the facility's corridors. "What's happening? Is it Matthew?" Dr. Reeves nodded grimly. "His neural patterns are unusual. We need your expertise." They entered the medical center to find Matthew lying motionless on a bed, surrounded by a team of doctors and nurses. His face was pale, dark circles under his closed eyes. Emily approached, her throat tight with worry. The lead physician turned to her. "Dr. Reeves, we're detecting intense neural activity, but it doesn't match any known patterns. It's as if his brain is trying to process an overwhelming amount of information." Emily leaned over Matthew, gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His skin felt cold to her touch. "I'm here, Matthew," she whispered, then straightened, addressing the medical team. I'll need full access to his neural scans. We need to understand what's happening in his mind. As days passed, Emily divided her time between monitoring the Kracken and working on Matthew's case. She slept little, her mind constantly racing with theories and potential solutions. The electromagnetic shield continued to protect the Kracken, but Dr. Reeves and his engineering team worked tirelessly to develop a more sustainable solution. One evening, as Emily pored over Matthew's latest scans, Dr. T'Pol entered the lab. "Dr. Reeves, there's someone here you should meet." Emily looked up, her tired eyes focusing on the man accompanying Dr. T'Pol. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Emily Reeves, this is Dr. Samuel Hardwick," T'Pol introduced. "He's a neurologist specializing in interspecies neural connections." Dr. Hardwick extended his hand. "I came as soon as I heard about your situation. I believe my expertise might be of use." Emily shook his hand, a glimmer of hope sparking within her. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Hardwick. We could certainly use your help." As they discussed Matthew's condition and the unique circumstances surrounding it, Dr. Hardwick's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "I've brought some advanced neural mapping technology that might provide insights into Mr. Chen's condition and his connection with the Kracken." While Dr. Hardwick began his work, Emily returned to the Krakken's enclosure. The creature's behavior had become increasingly agitated, its ground markings more erratic and intense. Dr. T'Pol stood nearby, her face creased with concentration as she attempted to establish a telepathic connection. "Any progress?" Emily asked. T'Pol shook her head. "Limited. Without Matthew as a bridge, it's like trying to decipher a language with no common reference points." As they watched, the Kracken let out a low, mournful sound that resonated through the facility. Emily felt a pang of empathy for the creature. It seemed lost without its connection to Matthew. An idea began to form in Emily's mind, pieces of a complex puzzle falling into place. She turned to Dr. T'Pol, her eyes bright with excitement and trepidation. What if we could create a temporary bridge between Matthew's unconscious mind and the Kracken? T'Pol raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting using the neural interface prototype?" Emily nodded. "Combined with Dr. Hardwick's mapping technology, it's risky, but it might stabilize both Matthew and the Kracken." The proposal sparked intense debate among the team. Dr. Hardwick expressed concerns about potential long-term effects on Matthew's brain, while Commander Steele worried about security implications. Dr. T'Pol, however, supported the plan, seeing its potential for groundbreaking discoveries in interspecies communication. As discussions continued, the Betazoid High Council intervened, approving the plan with strict conditions. The pressure on Emily and the team intensified as they began preparations for the procedure. In the medical center, Emily worked alongside Dr. Hardwick to modify the neural interface. Her fingers flew over the controls, making minute adjustments. "We need to incorporate additional safeguards," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. Dr. Hardwick nodded, his experienced eyes scanning the readouts. "Agreed. We're venturing into uncharted territory here. We can't be too careful." As they worked, a commotion from the Krakken's enclosure caught their attention. Dr. T'Pol's voice came over the intercom, urgent and filled with wonder. "Dr. Reeves, you need to see this immediately." Emily rushed to the enclosure, Dr. Hardwick close behind. The sight that greeted them was astonishing. The Kracken had created a new pattern of ground markings, more intricate and complex than anything they had seen before. Dr. Reeves, who had been called to the scene, studied the markings intently. This appears to be a mathematical sequence, far more advanced than anything the creature has produced before. The discovery added a new layer of urgency to their work. Emily turned to the assembled team, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "We need to proceed with the neural bridge immediately. This could be the key to understanding the Krakken's true intelligence." As final preparations were made, Emily found herself beside Matthew's bed. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We're going to bring you back, Matthew," she whispered. "Just hold on." The team took their positions. Dr. Hardwick manned the neural mapping equipment, while Dr. T'Pol prepared to monitor the Krakken's responses. Dr. Reeves stood ready to adjust the electromagnetic shield if needed. Emily's finger hovered over the activation switch for the neural interface. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Initiating neural bridge in 3, 2, 1. As the connection was established, Matthew's vital signs began to fluctuate wildly. At the same moment, the Kracken let out a low, resonant call that seemed to shake the very foundations of the facility. Emily's eyes darted between Matthew's monitors and the readings from the Kracken. Neural activity is spiking in both subjects, she reported, her voice tense. Dr. Hardwick leaned in, studying the neural maps with intense focus. I'm seeing synchronization patterns I've never encountered before. It's as if their minds are aligning. In the Kracken's enclosure, the creature's skin began to pulse with vibrant colors, its tendrils weaving complex patterns in the air. Dr. Tupal's eyes widened. The telepathic output is increasing exponentially. I'm sensing emotions, images, concepts I can barely comprehend. As the team watched in a mixture of awe and trepidation, Matthew's fingers twitched, then curled into a fist. His eyelids fluttered, and a small gasp escaped his lips. Emily leaned closer, her heart pounding. Matthew, can you hear me? Slowly, Matthew's eyes opened, but the gaze that met Emily's was not entirely human. His pupils had expanded, filled with swirling patterns of color that mirrored the Kracken's skin. When he spoke, his voice was a whisper, layered with an otherworldly resonance. Emily, I understand now. I see everything. The monitors erupted with alarms as Matthew's neural activity surged to unprecedented levels. The Kracken's call grew louder, filling the air with a symphony of alien tones. Emily's mind raced, torn between scientific fascination and deep concern for Matthew's safety. As the neural bridge pulsed with energy, she realized they stood on the precipice of a discovery that could change humanity's understanding of consciousness itself. But at what cost? With alarms blaring and the air thick with tension, Emily knew the next few moments would be crucial. The fate of Matthew, the Kracken, and perhaps the future of human-alien relations hung in the balance, as the unprecedented neural connection continued to unfold in ways none of them could have predicted. As the neural activity between Matthew and the Kracken intensified, a sudden calm descended upon the room. The alarms ceased their frantic wailing, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the soft beeping of monitors. Emily watched in astonishment as Matthew's vital signs began to stabilize, his heart rate and blood pressure returning to normal levels. It's working, Dr. Hardwick breathed, his eyes glued to the neural mapping display. Their patterns are synchronizing at a level I've never seen before. Emily leaned closer to Matthew, her heart pounding. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. She gasped as she met his gaze, for his eyes were no longer their familiar brown. Instead, they glowed with an otherworldly blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the Kracken's movements. Matthew, she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't respond verbally, but his body began to move. His motions were fluid, almost graceful, mirroring the Kracken's movements outside the medical center. Emily stepped back as Matthew rose from the bed, his feet barely touching the floor. Dr. Reeves, Emily called urgently, you need to see this. Dr. Reeves hurried into the room, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. Matthew had begun to trace intricate patterns on the floor with his fingers, leaving behind faint, glowing lines that hung in the air like holographic projections. These are equations, Dr. Reeves muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. And star charts. I recognize some of these formations, but others, they're from unexplored sectors of the galaxy. As they watched, transfixed, the intercom crackled to life. Dr. Tupal's voice came through, tinged with excitement and disbelief. You need to see what's happening out here. The Kracken, it's creating structures. They resemble ancient Betazoid architecture. Emily exchanged a look with Dr. Reeves before they both rushed to the observation window. Outside, the Kracken had begun manipulating the earth around it, forming delicate spirals and towering arches that seemed to defy gravity. The assembled Betazoid officials murmured in awe, recognizing elements of their own ancient history in the aliens' creations. Suddenly, alarms blared from the engineering section. Dr. Reeves's communicator buzzed urgently. "Sir," a panicked voice reported, "the electromagnetic shield is failing. We can't maintain it." Dr. Reeves paled. "If that shield goes down, the Kracken will be exposed to lethal levels of radiation." But as they watched, something extraordinary happened. The Krakken's skin began to shimmer with a faint blue glow, identical to the light in Matthew's eyes. The radiation readings on the nearby monitors began to drop rapidly. "It's neutralizing the radiation," Emily said in disbelief. "The Kracken is generating its own protective field." Commander Steele burst into the room, his face a mask of concern. "Dr. Reeves, what's going on here? Our sensors are picking up energy readings we can't explain. This creature may pose a significant threat." "With all due respect, Commander," Emily interjected, "I don't think the Kracken means us any harm. Look at what it's showing us. This could be the greatest breakthrough in interspecies communication we've ever seen." As if to underscore her point, Dr. T'Pol's voice came over the intercom again, filled with urgency. "I've made a breakthrough in interpreting the Krakken's communications. It's trying to warn us about something, a cosmic event that could threaten Beta Z." Emily's mind raced, connecting the dots. "The star charts," she said, gesturing to Matthew's creations. "They must be related to this event." Commander Steele frowned, his hand hovering near his communicator. "I'm sorry, but I can't ignore the potential danger here. I'm ordering defensive measures to be prepared." Before the situation could escalate further, a new voice cut through the tension. "Let's not be too hasty, Commander." All heads turned to see a tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair entering the room. His uniform bore the insignia of an admiral from Earth's interstellar fleet. "Admiral Xander Voss," he introduced himself, his keen eyes taking in the scene. "I've been dispatched to assess the situation here, and from what I can see, we're dealing with something far more complex than a simple security threat." As Admiral Voss began to mediate between the conflicting parties, Emily turned her attention back to Matthew and the Kracken. The connection between them seemed to be growing stronger by the moment. Matthew's body now hovered several inches above the floor, surrounded by a faint blue aura that matched the Krakken's energy field. Outside, the Kracken had begun to grow, its mass expanding as it appeared to draw energy from its surroundings. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Dr. T'Pol's voice came over the intercom once more, her tone grave. "We've deciphered more of the message. The cosmic event, it's a massive solar flare from Beta Z's binary star system. If it occurs, it could potentially destroy the planet." The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation sank in. Admiral Voss was the first to speak, his voice steady and determined. "We need a plan. Dr. Reeves, Dr. Hardwick, what are our options?" As the scientists began to discuss possibilities, Emily's gaze remained fixed on Matthew. His glowing eyes seemed to look through her, seeing something beyond the confines of the room. She couldn't shake the feeling that the key to saving Beta Z lay within the mysterious connection between human and alien. The Betazoid High Council, upon receiving news of the impending threat, declared a planetary state of emergency. Their instructions were clear. Find a way to protect Beta Z using the knowledge shared by the Kracken through its connection with Matthew. Admiral Voss, after careful consideration of the situation, proposed a bold strategy. "We need to use the combined knowledge and abilities of Matthew and the Kracken to create a planetary defense system," he announced. "It's risky, but it may be our best chance." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The plan would require maintaining the neural link between Matthew and the Kracken for an extended period. The potential consequences to Matthew's mind and body were unknown. As the team debated the merits and risks of the plan, Emily found herself torn. Her scientific curiosity urged her to push forward, to uncover the secrets of this unprecedented alien communication. But her heart ached at the thought of the danger to Matthew. The Kracken outside continued to grow, its tendrils reaching towards the sky as if trying to touch the stars that held Beta Z's fate. Matthew's body pulsed with the same ethereal energy, his hands tracing complex patterns in the air. Time was running out. A decision had to be made. Would they risk Matthew's life and sanity in an attempt to save an entire planet? Or would they sever the connection and scramble for alternative solutions with limited time and resources? As Emily looked from Matthew's glowing form to the anxious faces around her, she knew that, whatever choice they made, nothing would ever be the same. The fate of Beta Zed, the future of human-alien relations, and the life of the man she had come to care for deeply, all hung in the balance. The room hummed with tension as Admiral Voss turned to address the assembled team. "We need to make a decision," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "And we need to make it now." Now! The Admiral's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of responsibility. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze shifting between Matthew's glowing form and the anxious faces around her. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter a word, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Voss's communicator chirped urgently. He listened intently, his expression growing grave. "We have confirmation," he announced, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "The Kraxon's warning is correct. A massive solar flare is headed towards Beta Zed." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Admiral Voss stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Listen up, everyone. We're initiating emergency protocols effective immediately. Dr. Reeves, begin the evacuation of all non-essential personnel from this facility. Commander Steele, I want your team ready to assist with crowd control and evacuation procedures, planet-wide." As the room emptied, leaving only key personnel, Admiral Voss turned to Emily and the remaining scientists. "We need a plan, and we need it fast. You have the most experience with the Kraken and this neural link. What are our options?" Emily's mind raced, analyzing the situation from every angle. She glanced at Matthew, still suspended in midair, his eyes pulsing with alien light. "Admiral," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I believe our best chance lies in maintaining the neural link between Matthew and the Kraken. The information they're sharing could be crucial to developing a planetary defense system." Dr. Hardwick stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "We need to consider the risk to Matthew. The prolonged neural connection could have severe consequences on his mind and body." "Understood?" Admiral Voss nodded, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Dr. T-Pal, what's your assessment of the Kraken's intentions?" The Betazoid scientist closed her eyes briefly, focusing her telepathic senses. "The Kraken's thoughts are complex, Admiral, but I sense no malevolence. If anything, there's an overwhelming desire to help, to protect." Admiral Voss absorbed this information, his tactical mind processing the risks and potential rewards. After a moment of tense silence, he made his decision. "We'll proceed with maintaining the neural link, but with strict parameters. Dr. Hardwick, I want constant monitoring of Matthew's vital signs. If his condition deteriorates beyond a certain threshold, we pull the plug immediately." Emily felt a mix of relief and apprehension wash over her. She approached Matthew, reaching out to touch his arm. His skin was cool to the touch, vibrating with an otherworldly energy. "Emily," Admiral Voss called, his tone softening slightly. "I know you have a personal stake in this, but I need you focused on the bigger picture. The fate of an entire planet is at stake." She nodded, steeling herself. "Understood, Admiral. I won't let personal feelings cloud my judgment." As the team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Emily turned her attention to enhancing the neural interface. She worked alongside Dr. T-Pal, their fingers flying over holographic displays as they fine-tuned the system to extract maximum information from the Kraken through Matthew. Outside, the Kraken continued to grow at an astonishing rate. Its massive form now towered over the research facility, its tendrils reaching towards the sky like colossal pillars. The creature's skin pulsed with vibrant colors, mirroring the patterns that danced across Matthew's suspended form. Dr. Reeves burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement and fear. "The stellar observation data just came in. The solar flare will reach Beta Zed in approximately 72 hours. Its magnitude, it's beyond anything we've ever recorded. If it hits, it could strip away the planet's atmosphere." The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Admiral Voss's voice cut through the silence. "Then we have 48 hours to implement a solution. Dr. Reeves, I want you and your engineering team to start constructing a network of energy emitters around the planet. Use the star charts and equations Matthew provided earlier as a starting point." As the hours ticked by, the research facility transformed into a hub of feverish activity. Engineers and scientists worked around the clock, translating the abstract knowledge flowing from Matthew and the Kracken into tangible defenses. Emily found herself at the center of it all, acting as a bridge between the alien consciousness and the human efforts to save Beta Z. She worked tirelessly, interpreting the stream of data and coordinating with the various teams. Suddenly, alarms blared once again. Commander Steele's voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. "Admiral, we have a situation. Word of the impending threat has leaked to the general population. We're seeing outbreaks of civil unrest in major cities across the planet." Admiral Voss's expression hardened. "Deploy your troops to assist Betazoid security forces. Priority 1 is maintaining order and ensuring the evacuation proceeds smoothly. We can't afford any disruptions to our defense efforts." As the crisis on the ground unfolded, Emily noticed a change in Matthew's condition. His body began to pulse more intensely with the alien energy, and the stream of data flowing through the neural link increased exponentially. "Admiral," she called out, excitement coloring her voice. "Matthew's transmitting new information. It's incredible. Advanced energy manipulation techniques, fundamental forces of the universe. This could be the key to refining our defense system." The team redoubled their efforts, incorporating the new knowledge into their designs. The network of energy emitters around Beta Z began to take shape, growing more sophisticated with each passing hour. As the 48-hour deadline approached, a mix of hope and tension filled the air. The defense system was nearly complete, and simulations showed a high probability of success in deflecting the solar flare. However, a new problem emerged, threatening to undermine all their hard work. Dr. Reeves approached Admiral Voss, his face grave. "Sir, we've run into a significant issue. The energy required to power the defense system, it's more than Beta Z's power grid can handle. If we activate it at full capacity, we risk causing widespread destruction before the flare even hits." The room fell silent, the weight of this new obstacle crushing their hopes. But before despair could take hold, Emily noticed a change in Matthew's expression. His glowing eyes seemed to focus, and his lips moved silently. "Wait," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Kracken, it's offering a solution." All eyes turned to the window, where the massive alien creature loomed. As they watched in awe, the Krakken's body began to pulse with intense energy. Tendrils of blue light stretched out from its form, connecting with the power stations across Beta Z. It's channeling its own energy into our power grid," Dr. T-Pal said, her voice filled with wonder. "The Kracken is providing the boost we need to activate the defense system." As the alien's energy flowed into Beta Z's infrastructure, the impossible became possible. The planetary defense system hummed to life, energy emitters across the globe activating in perfect synchronization. Admiral Voss stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the blue glow that now enveloped the planet. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, his voice steady. "But thanks to this incredible act of cooperation, we have a fighting chance." Emily turned back to Matthew, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and fear. His body showed signs of strain from the prolonged neural link, but his expression remained serene. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Hold on, Matthew," she whispered. "Just a little longer." As the team prepared for the final countdown, the Kracken continued to grow, its massive form now visible from orbit. The creature channeled more and more energy into the planet, its actions defying all preconceptions about its nature and intentions. With less than 24 hours remaining before the solar flare would reach Beta Z, Admiral Voss stood at the center of the command room, his finger hovering over the activation switch for the planetary defense system. The fate of an entire world hung in the balance, dependent on this unprecedented collaboration between humans, Betazoids, and the enigmatic Kracken. Emily held her breath, her gaze fixed on Matthew's glowing form. As Admiral Voss began the final countdown, she silently vowed to bring Matthew back safely, whatever it takes. The room tensed, ready to face the greatest challenge of their lives, as the defense system powered up and Beta Z prepared to stand against the fury of its own star. Star! The room tensed, ready to face the greatest challenge of their lives, as the defense system powered up and Beta Z prepared to stand against the fury of its own sun. As the final minutes ticked away, Emily's eyes darted between the holographic displays and Matthew's suspended form. His face contorted in concentration, sweat beading on his brow as he continued to channel the Kraken's vast knowledge. Suddenly, Emily noticed an anomaly in Matthew's neural patterns. She rushed to the monitoring station, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the data. Her heart raced as the implications became clear. "Admiral," she called out, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "I've discovered something crucial about the Kraken's intentions." Admiral Voss strode over, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "What is it, Dr. Chen?" Emily took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. The Kraken isn't just providing energy for our defenses, it's attempting to merge its consciousness with Beta Z's biosphere. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Dr. Tapal stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Are you certain?" Emily nodded, pulling up a series of complex graphs on the main display. "Look at these patterns. They're not just energy transfers. The Kraken is synchronizing its neural network with the planet's ecosystem." Admiral Voss's brow furrowed as he processed this information. "What are the implications of this merger?" Dr. Hardwick joined the discussion, his scientific curiosity overriding his earlier caution. If successful, it could create a symbiotic relationship between the Kraken and Beta Z. The planet itself could become a sentient entity capable of defending itself against future cosmic threats. The implications were staggering. The room buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the team considered the potential outcomes of this unprecedented event. Admiral Voss's communicator chirped urgently, "Sir, the solar flare has entered the outer atmosphere. We're out of time." The Admiral's face hardened with perseverance. "Activate the defense system. Now." With a nod, Dr. Reeves initiated the sequence. The facility trembled as massive energy beams erupted from emitters across the planet, coalescing into a shimmering shield that enveloped Beta Z. Outside, the Kraken's enormous form pulsed with intensifying energy. Its tendrils, now larger than skyscrapers, channeled a torrent of power into the planetary grid. The creature's skin rippled with complex patterns, mirroring the shield's structure. As the solar flare struck the outer edges of the shield, the room's displays erupted with warnings. The planet shuddered under the onslaught, and for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed the defenses might buckle. Emily's attention snapped back to Matthew as alarms blared from his biomonitors. His vital signs spiked dangerously, his body rigid with strain. Without hesitation, she grabbed the neural interface headset. "Emily, what are you doing?" Dr. Hardwick shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "Helping," she replied, securing the device and activating the link before anyone could stop her. The world around Emily dissolved as her consciousness merged with Matthew's and the Kraken's. She gasped, overwhelmed by the vastness of the alien mind and the intricate web of energy flowing through Beta Z. Through this shared awareness, Emily felt Matthew's struggle to maintain the connection. His mind, brilliant but human, was stretched to its limits by the alien consciousness. Acting on instinct and her deep emotional connection to Matthew, Emily extended her own thoughts, creating a bridge between human and Kraken. In the physical world, Admiral Voss watched in astonishment as the shield stabilized, growing stronger by the second. The solar flare raged against the barrier, but its fury was dispersed, deflected harmlessly into space. Inside the neural link, Emily guided the merger between the Kraken and Beta Z. Her scientific knowledge helped shape the integration, ensuring the planet's existing ecosystem was enhanced rather than overwritten. She felt Matthew's presence beside her, their minds working in perfect synchronization. As the immediate danger passed, a new sensation washed over them. The Kraken's physical form began to dissolve, its energy and consciousness spreading throughout Beta Z's biosphere. Emily and Matthew, still linked, guided this final stage of integration. In the command center, the team watched in awe as the planet itself seemed to come alive. Bioluminescent patterns, reminiscent of the Kraken's markings, spread across Beta Z's surface. The shield dissipated, no longer needed as the planet pulsed with its new, vibrant energy. Slowly, Emily felt her individual awareness returning. She opened her eyes to find herself back in the medical center, her hand intertwined with Matthew's. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open for the first time in days. Their gazes met, filled with shared understanding and deepened emotions from their extraordinary experience. "Welcome back," Emily whispered, her voice thick with relief and affection. Matthew managed a weak smile. "That was incredible," he murmured. Before they could say more, Admiral Voss entered, his face a mixture of relief and amazement. "Dr. Chen, Mr. Erickson, I need a full report on what just happened. But first, I think you both need to see this." He helped them to their feet and led them to the observation deck. As they looked out over Beta Z's transformed landscape, Emily and Matthew gasped in unison. The planet glowed with intricate patterns of bioluminescence, pulsing gently like a giant living organism. "The Betazoid High Council is reporting unprecedented phenomena across the planet," Admiral Voss explained. "The population is experiencing enhanced telepathic abilities, extended to encompass the planet itself. It seems Beta Z has become a true symbiotic entity." As the implications of their success sank in, Emily felt a surge of excitement for the scientific discoveries that lay ahead. She turned to Matthew, seeing the same enthusiasm reflected in his eyes. Their shared ordeal had forged a bond deeper than either had anticipated, and the promise of exploring this new frontier together filled her with joy. Admiral Voss cleared his throat, drawing their attention back to him. "The Betazoid High Council has extended an invitation for a permanent human scientific presence on the planet. They're eager to understand these changes and believe our cooperation will be crucial moving forward." Emily's mind raced with the possibilities. "Admiral, with your permission, I'd like to lead the research efforts here. We have an unprecedented opportunity to study this planetary evolution." Matthew nodded in agreement. "I'd like to stay as well, sir. My experience with the Kracken could be invaluable in understanding the new symbiotic relationship." Admiral Voss smiled, a rare sight that highlighted the momentous nature of the occasion. "I had a feeling you'd say that. I'll make the necessary arrangements. For now, get some rest. You've both earned it." As the Admiral left, Emily and Matthew turned back to the view of Beta Z. The binary suns were setting, casting a warm glow over the transformed landscape. Matthew gently took Emily's hand, and she leaned into him, both drawing comfort from the contact. "So," Matthew said softly, "ready for our next adventure?" Emily smiled, her heart full of hope and excitement for the future they would build together on this reborn world. "Absolutely," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Let's see where this new frontier takes us." As night fell, Beta Z's bioluminescent patterns began to glow more brightly, a beautiful reminder of the extraordinary journey that had brought human ingenuity, alien consciousness, and a world together in a union that would shape the future of galactic exploration and understanding.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.